Hey, sorry this is such a long one, but I had a lot to say about these games. Hope you enjoy. Commando. Commando was originally an arcade game, but this Commodore port is the version I'll always think of. The joystick only had one button, which was an issue with a lot of C64 games, especially ones that were ports of other games. The solutions they came up with were pretty varied. For this one, the joystick button would shoot bullets, but to throw grenades, you had to press the spacebar on the keyboard. The spacebar is the biggest key by far, and easy to reach for without looking, so it wasn't a terrible compromise, but it did mean you had to keep the joystick close to the keyboard at all times, and physically take your hand off of the joystick. Grenades were a fundamental feature of the game, since it was the only way to hit enemies that were taking cover or were on top of structures like buildings and bridges. Since you need at least one hand to hold the joystick steady while the other hand moves it, that pretty much means your character stops moving. Unless you're bracing the joystick on the table or floor or something. Either way, it's very awkward. While it's far from perfect, it's pretty fun, but really what stands out for me above all else is the music. I've talked about this game's music before in several videos, and I'm definitely going to talk about it again in future videos. Which is why I was honestly a little hesitant to rehash something I already said or say something I'm going to say again later, but I can't talk about this game without talking about how its music impacted me. Before I played this game, I was definitely aware of music in games, but it was something I never really thought about. It was just something that was there. This game awoke something in me. One day I had been playing it a bunch of times, got a game over, and just kind of sat there on the title screen. Commodore games take a while to load, so you tend to stick with one game for a while, so you don't have to wait for the next one to load, and if you get tired of one game, sometimes you just need a break. The in-game music is the same music that plays during the title screen, so it didn't really get my attention at first, but as I sat and watched the title sequence go through different stages of the game, it slowly started to dawn on me. Wait, there's more to this music than I realized. Most of the time I die or beat a level before the music can finish, and I only hear maybe a minute of it or so it didn't occur to me that there was much more to the tune I was listening to. But here I was sitting there and listening, and the music kept going, and it just had me in awe. Today I've been composing music for over 20 years, including in more recent years for actual professional video games now. And of course I do YouTube videos about game music as well. Suffice to say, it's an important part of who I am, and I can trace it all back to that one day sitting in my basement when I stopped playing a video game to just listen to it. To this day, it's still one of my favorite video game soundtracks of all time. Leaderboard. Leaderboard, which I knew as Leaderboard Golf, because that's what it said in my disc's label, was a pretty decent golf game for the system. I'm not really into golf, but I'll tell you who was. My dad. Here's the thing. The game allows you to play a standard 18 holes, or if you want to go all out, you can actually pick up to 72. This is how golf tournaments would work in real life. You'd essentially do 4 18-hole rounds back to back, and the winner would be the player with the best score across the full set. So my dad, big golf fan of the house, says, "Hey, it would be fun if we played the full 72 holes together." He made my brother and I play with him for the whole thing. I never played it again after that. I never even wanted to look at it. I'm sure it's a good golf game, but I just can't. G.I. Joe. This G.I. Joe game is weirdly inconsistent in quality. There are parts that are extremely fun, and parts that are unbelievably tedious. Like, slap yourself in the face just so you can actually feel something again tedious. First, the game will give you a world map and show you a bunch of different spots where something is going on. I guess that's where Cobra activity has been spotted. You pick a spot on the map, and you can pick which Joe you want to play as. But first, the Cobra roster comes up. If you have a second player, they'll play as the Cobra agent. But if you move the player 1 joystick, it will assume there's no player 2 and automatically pick one at random to be your AI-controlled opponent. That's when Duke points a commanding, yet encouraging finger at you, the player, and instructs you to turn the disc over. You flip over the disc, put it back in, press the button, and he yells, "Yo, Joe!" And then you wait, and wait, and wait for it to load the stage while it plays this animation of a vehicle driving across the screen. At first I thought it was a progress bar, and when it reaches the end of the screen, that means it's finished loading. Nope. It starts over again at the beginning, and you just keep waiting. When it actually loads, you have this fun arena battle. You shoot each other with various weapons, depending on which character you picked, and different stages would have cool obstacles and traps. If your battle takes place in this Cobra base, these robot snakes pop up and shoot lasers at you. If it's in this outdoor arena, both Joe and Cobra aircraft fly overhead and shoot at their respective foe. There's also this really funny street stage where there's just this inexplicable boxy robot guy walking around that would pick a player at random and attack them. If the robot's on your side and you accidentally shoot it, it would turn on you. But if it's attacking you, you need to shoot it 3 times to make it leave you alone and attack your opponent. I always thought it was like your shots were somehow reprogramming the robot to attack the other player, and that thought made it more fun. I also kind of got a weird kick out of how the players would drop their hands when they were defeated, like they just got exasperated. A bomb drops on their head and they're just like, fine. But their face doesn't change. It's like a very mild annoyance getting shot in the face with a bazooka. The characters all have different stats and different weapons. Whenever I played it, everyone would just want to be Snake Eyes, the cool ninja with a laser gun. Or he could be Blowtorch with his awesome flamethrower. If you were Cobra, you could be Cobra Commander or Destro. Yeah, these guys rocked. A lot of cool characters were here, but also a few ones that just kind of seemed lame. Zap? Snowjob? I don't even remember him from the show. What does he do? Hit you with a shovel? My most vivid memory of the game is this one time my brothers and my friend came over and was playing with me. I think for a second he tried to move the joystick and nothing happened. Maybe it was just a temporary lag or weird hit detection, something weird with his joystick, whatever it was. I don't know, but in any case he yelled out, "I can't move!" while frantically pulling the joystick around in all directions. But by now it actually was working again, and his character just flailed around in a circle. Something about it was just hilarious in the moment. The fact that he was just so instantaneously proven wrong, and him shouting, "I can't move," while simultaneously have his character do a breakdancing routine. It stayed with me for years. So yeah, this part of the game is a lot of fun for a minute or two, until one player takes enough damage to be defeated. Then the match is over, and you have to flip the disc over and wait and wait and wait and wait. Then start the whole thing over again. Although next time you play, the losing character would have bars over them as if they were captured, and you couldn't use them again. These were usually the characters you want to play the most because those are the ones you kept picking, so eventually they'd lose, and then no more Snake Eyes. But you don't really run out of characters. Eventually it would just release the captured ones and you could use them again. There's no ending, you just keep playing until you get sick of the loading screens. These screens are awful. Load times do tend to be an issue with Commodore games. That's kind of what it was infamous for, but it's particularly aggravating in this game because it happens so frequently and for so long. Every time the game gets fun again, the round comes to an end, and then you get interrupted to flip the disc over, and wait, and it just keeps droning on and on with this same G.I. Joe music that you will very quickly learn to hate. What's also nasty is that when the stage loads, it thrusts you right into the game. If you don't like sitting perfectly still with your hands in your lap for several minutes, you probably got up to do something while it was loading. And then the game starts and you have to rush back over your joystick. There's no press button to start. There's no countdown so you can get ready. The match just starts and something on the stage could already be attacking you. Anyway, aside from these one-on-one battles, there's a second mode of play, and it's the worst. You might notice those little blips on the screen have different shapes. If you pick the second type of blip, it becomes a vehicle stage. You pick which vehicle you want to be, and then you enter this field. It's no longer a competitive game. It's a mission where you have to destroy all the Cobra units on the map. There's almost no information on how or where to navigate, so you have to wander. A lot. If you have a second player you're playing with, they're no longer your opponent for this stage. They're on your side. They don't have their own vehicle though. Their joystick can be used as a secondary function for your vehicle. Like if you're the tank, the second player can adjust how far your shots go, or angle your cannon so you can shoot at enemies without driving straight towards them. If you're the Jeep, the second player can actually control the rockets. These are pretty useful features, but that's the only thing one player does. You can just have one player drive and the other player shoot, but they're both things the one player can do on their own, so it feels pretty redundant. And that's if you pick the land vehicles. If you pick the jet or the helicopter, player 2 has even less to do. The only thing on their joystick that does anything is their fire button, which shoots. Something player 1 is already able to do perfectly on their own, so this time it's completely redundant. It's awful. These stages are so dull. There's a little explosion effect when you shoot, but the enemy units don't have any death animation or anything. They just suddenly turn into a pile of debris. It's not even satisfying. For me, the best vehicle to play as was always the tank. It's slow, but you can take your time and line up your shots, and if you're very careful, you can take out most of the enemies without getting shot. It's grueling, but it's the vehicle you're the most likely to succeed with. If you play as the jet, you're constantly moving. It's extremely hard to control because it steers so sluggishly in such a wide arc, and enemies fire heat-seeking missiles at you. It's not as boring as with the tank, but it's a lot more frustrating. The Jeep is basically like the tank but much faster, but you also can't turn except when you're moving, and it's so incredibly frustrating to control. If you do manage to survive long enough to beat this stage, it takes forever because you have to wander a giant area looking to find whatever it is you might have missed, and there's no map screen or compass or anything to direct you, so you have no idea what's still left to destroy. This missile thingy is half destroyed. Is that enough, or do you have to completely demolish it? I don't know. And it's confusing to know when you've even succeeded. Look, I just beat the stage while I'm still in the middle of shooting at these guys? So you don't need to destroy everything? What happened? The one thing that for some reason always amused me about this segment was these weird rock things. The way they were drawn, they kind of looked like giant poops. And I'd run over them and they made this funny sound. I don't know what it is, but that sound cracked me up. After a while, I'd be going out of my way to run over giant poos rather than trying to blow up Cobra tanks because, comparatively speaking, it was more fun. Compared to the fast-paced action of the gunfights, these missions were dreadful. I couldn't quite figure out for a while which of these little blips represented which type of stage, and after a while I thought the shapes were meaningless and you don't have a way of knowing what stage you're going to get. So I would just pick one and hope for the best, and any time I get the select a vehicle screen I would be so disappointed. After a few times I just started failing on purpose so it would go back to the main map screen and then I could get back to the fun part. By the way, I didn't even think about this until I was halfway finished editing this video, but maybe the dumbest thing about all this is how much the vehicle stages slant the game in the first player's favor. Player 2 already has less characters to choose from than Player 1, but when you start a vehicle stage, after Cobra picks a guy, G.I. Joe picks from a list of 4 characters that are specifically reserved for vehicle stages. That means that if Player 1 loses one of the vehicle stages, that only means they lose that vehicle next time, and it doesn't impact the arena battles. But if Player 1 beats the stage, Cobra loses a character across the board. Remember that during a vehicle stage, Player 2 is on Player 1's side, so they are actively helping the first player, and if they succeed, they are punished by having one of their characters put behind bars. What a stupid idea. And Cobra chooses their character first, before we're shown the vehicles to pick from, so if Player 2 was unclear that it's going to be a vehicle stage, they might pick their favorite character only to find out they're about to help lock that character out from future battles. So what is the player supposed to do once the stage begins? It's either just sit there and wait for your opponent to finish the whole stage, or help them ultimately sabotage their own efforts. Or alternatively, if Player 2 can control the tank's range, they can lower it all the way to the bottom so it's impossible for the first player to hit anything, guaranteeing a loss. But that just makes it an exasperating experience for the other guy. Either way, someone is miserable. They did not think this through. Space Pilot 2. I hadn't played the first Space Pilot game when I discovered this one. It's pretty cool. Each stage is just open space with enemy ships periodically appearing from every angle, and you have to survive their attacks long enough and then warp to the next zone. Each zone would have different varieties of enemies, which were mostly the same functionally, but had a different appearance. For instance, these ones looked like the Starship Enterprise. It turns out the first Space Pilot game was an adaptation of the arcade game Time Pilot. In Time Pilot, you fly a time-traveling fighter jet, and you get attacked by aircraft from different eras in aviation. In one stage, you're in the 1910s fighting biplanes and zeppelins, and then you jump forward in time, eventually making your way to modern and even futuristic settings. It really made you want to keep playing just to see what the next era looked like. And conceptually, it made sense that each stage takes place in a brief window before you reach the next time jump. Apparently, when they adapted it to Commodore 64, they just called it Space Pilot instead. Why would you downplay the part of the game that makes it so cool? Very strange. It doesn't even take place in space. You're just in the sky. Anyway, Space Pilot 2 made some big visual improvements. Instead of flying around the sky, you're now hovering over some kind of vast technological alien environment. The sound effects give the game a fantastic atmosphere. In the first game, you'd play until a timer ran out and then fought a boss. In this one, there's no boss. You just have to survive until you reach the time for the next jump, and it would automatically transport you to the next stage. The best part of the game is the amazing warp animation that happened when you would move on to the next area. Check this out. I think the major design issue, though, is that without Time Pilot's gimmick of traveling forward in time to new eras, there's no sense of progression, and it just feels like jumping from one random assortment of foes to another. Pogo Joe. So this is basically a Q*bert clone, but instead of a weird alien guy, you're just some dude on a pogo stick. There are a bunch of different enemies that hop around after you, but I had a very confusing time telling which ones are safe to touch and which ones aren't. It looks like they spawn as eggs, and you can jump on them safely, but then they hatch, and some of them you can jump on, and some you can't. The graphics aren't too intuitive. There's nothing about how they look that tells you, this guy is safe to jump on, but this guy will mess you up. There are some new elements, like these stages where the board is invisible, and the squares disappear when you jump on them. So it does have its own unique mechanics that make it different from just plain Q*bert. But the main reason I wanted to talk about this game was the stage names. In the main menu, aside from playing the game normally, there's a level tour option that would show you all the different stages, and each one had its own name. I remember as a little kid, I went through and quickly realized how many stages had jokes for names, and thought it was really funny. But then I came back to it later as an older kid and realized how head-scratching they all were as jokes. Look at this. Ode to Zippy? X marks your nose? And who can forget this tribute to the 1970s movie Butterflies Are Free, with this big infinity symbol of a stage named Butterflies Are Brie? How about tennis antibody? Yeah, these puns are forehead slappers, but honestly, taking this guided tour of the stages was more fun than playing the game. Starfleet 1. This game was not an actual Star Trek license. I have no idea how much trouble it was navigating such a copyright minefield, because this was Star Trek down to an impressive level of detail. At the time, it was a pretty good simulation of being the captain of a starship, but of course, being on the Commodore 64, it had limitations, and some very disappointing design choices. You have a whole bunch of different systems you can operate that can all be damaged and which self-repair over time, like on Star Trek. You have phasers, torpedoes, tractor beams, transporters, you can launch probes, lay mines. A lot of detail went into this. So your mission is to go out there and destroy a bunch of Klingon warships. Oh, sorry, I mean Krellin warships. Totally original characters, do not steal. And all your missions are just space battles. Nothing else. Commodore 64 didn't allow for that much nuance. But before you do any of that, this game had a copy protection measure where it would ask you to go find a specific word in the manual and type it in. If you were incorrect, it would call you a Krellin spy and not let you play. For an anti-piracy measure, I think it worked because this is one of the few games I owned that was not a copy. The manual was pretty thick, and photocopying that whole thing was way harder than just copying the disc. Luckily for anyone who wants to play it today, the whole manual is scanned and available online. And not only that, but someone actually wrote up a whole list of all the words the game would ask for, so you don't need the manual. You can choose a short, medium, or long mission, but as far as I'm concerned, always pick a long mission. I find it's really difficult and sometimes impossible to complete a short mission before running out of time. It's based too much on random luck. Long missions require you to destroy more ships, but the extra time it gives you allows you to explore more thoroughly, which hugely reduces the luck factor so you can actually beat it. The game places you in an area of space that's completely unmapped, and you have to explore to see what's there. The first thing you're going to need to do is find one of the star bases, since they're the only way to get resupplied after a battle. This part of the mission is extremely risky, as it's possible to get destroyed outright before getting to one. I don't know why an area of space that has 5 Starfleet starbases is completely unmapped, but whatever. I find the best strategy from the get-go is often to go to a corner of the map and launch your probes, since you cover the most ground that way. Then you have the best chance of finding a starbase and a large number of Krellins to fight. Weirdly enough, this game has a lot of good custom graphics, and yet the main monitor only uses plain text to display everything. Your ship is represented by the capital letter of your ship's name. Krellin ships are represented by a lowercase k, starbases are a number sign, stars are an asterisk. It's easy to understand, but still, why not use new graphics instead? Your map is divided into an 8x8 grid of quadrants. I don't know why they're called quadrants when there's more than 4 of them, but that's what the game calls them. The most efficient way to eliminate as many Krellins as possible is to find a quadrant with 5 enemy warships, which is the maximum the game will allow, and blast them all with torpedoes. You can use phasers, but those use up a lot of power, and that's always in short supply. Annoyingly, the combat is turn-based, and the Krellins get to act before you do. When you arrive in a quadrant, they all get a turn to fire on you. Then when you submit your attacks, they get another turn to fire on you before you have your turn to shoot. If you fight 5 ships at once, it's likely your shields are going to get ruptured unless the ships are spread out enough to keep hitting different sides of your shields. The ship's computer will automatically raise or lower shields as enemies appear or are defeated, but don't do anything to maintain them, so you may have to keep redirecting power to the shields between rounds of combat. Often you'll have to save power by only reinforcing specific sides of the ship, which is a lot of busy work. Torpedoes usually destroy Krellins in one hit, but sometimes randomly they're deflected. I can't tell if that means they did any damage or not, but it just doesn't always destroy them. So sometimes I order the ship to fire 2 torpedoes at each ship, so if any of them are deflected, it still destroys them. Annoyingly, the game will only let you fire a maximum of 5 torpedoes at any time, so if there's 5 opponents, 1 or 2 of them are probably going to deflect them. If there's only 1 ship left after a battle, and it seems like it's about time to return to a starbase, I use phasers and allocate enough power to disable it without destroying it. Then I can use a tractor beam to capture the ship, and the transporters to send troops down to take prisoners, and then I head over to the nearest starbase. Docking with a starbase allows me to turn over the Krellin ship and the prisoners, repower my ship, restock my torpedoes, replace crew members that were killed, and basically continue the mission like new. Although they don't ever replace my probes for some reason, you only get 3 per mission and that's it. It takes time away from your mission when you dock because of all the repairs and such, but it's necessary. It's the only way to survive. You get bonus points for turning over captured ships and enemy soldiers, and after a large battle, I usually need to get fixed up anyway, so I always do it because I might as well bring something with me. The game basically repeats like this over and over again. After you complete a mission, the game will save your progress on disk so you can continue, and after a bunch of completed missions, you can get promoted to higher ranks. As you get promoted, it gets more challenging, but this is basically the combat. Take on as many ships as you can, get the crap kicked out of you in the process, go to a starbase, repair, repeat, something about lather, and Bob's your own grandpa. Where it starts getting really aggravating is when certain critical systems get damaged. Damaged systems get repaired on their own over time, or you can allocate power to repair systems more quickly. But power is precious in this game, and sometimes you just can't do it. And having critical systems damaged will mess you up. If the system that controls the shields gets damaged, you cannot adjust your shields at all. If your shield control system is damaged, Krellins can burn a hole through one side of your shields, then that side is totally exposed and there's nothing you can do about it. They can keep hitting you and more systems will be damaged as a result. You can move around so they hit the other side, but every time you move they get another attack round. And when combat is over, if shield control is still damaged, you can't turn the shields off. and that means they'll continue to take up a huge amount of energy that can't be used for anything else, like, say, navigation, or more pressingly, repairs. Being low on energy is a major issue this game has. Energy can only be recovered by docking at a starbase. You'd think a starship based on the Star Trek universe would have its own power source that generates its own power, but it doesn't. It basically runs on a big battery that needs to be charged by going back to a starbase. This leads to some huge problems. When you leave a starbase fully repaired and fully charged, ready to go, you have 5,000 units of energy. When your shields are raised, they by default use 4,000 of that energy, 1,000 energy each for all 4 sides. Every time an enemy shoots you, it does about 100 to 500 points of damage to the shields, meaning the shields are reduced by that much energy, and you get that much less energy back when the shields come back down. Considering each enemy at minimum will get 2 shots on you before you destroy them, that adds up really fast. By the time you're on even your second battle, you don't have 4,000 units of energy to dedicate to shields, so the computer just gives you as much protection as possible and leaves you around 100 points for everything else. A single shot with your phasers will require 100 to 500 points of energy to destroy an enemy, so in almost every circumstance, you just flat out do not have enough energy to fire phasers even once. Also, if you can't devote energy to repairing a system, all you can do is wait for the system to get repaired on its own. So when multiple systems are damaged, you're in big trouble. I once had my navigation computer and shield systems damaged, so when I would try to return to a starbase, my ship couldn't fly straight and kept veering off course, so I had to keep retrying, with less and less energy every time I fired up the engines. If I didn't have the shield using up all my power, I could have used its energy to repair the navigation system, but I couldn't. And I didn't have enough power to repair the shield control to free all the energy it was using up. I ended up making it to the quadrant with a starbase, but couldn't quite navigate to the right tile, and I wound up running out of power just 1 tile away from the starbase, and got a game over because my ship was stranded out in space. Like, hello, starbase! I'm right here! You said hello to me when I entered the quadrant. Don't you have a tractor beam or something? I have a tractor beam. And why does my ship get completely destroyed when I run out of power? It's also really annoying that you only get a maximum of 20 torpedoes. Every time I go back to the starbase, it refills up to 20. That's it. I can use up more than 5 per battle and sometimes more than 10. So that's what your experience is. You're going back and forth, having 1 or 2 battles, then going back to the starbase. Another handful of battles, back to the starbase. Under the best of circumstances, you can stretch it out a bit more and have a few more smaller battles, but you're still going to and from starbases over and over again. I'd be a little more okay with that if the reason I needed to go back was because I'd taken too much damage or something like that. Because then that's something you can fix with skill level. I could experiment with taking on less enemies at a time, try different tactics, and figure out the best way to stay alive, and maybe find a way to stretch out my time between starbase visits. But the primary reason I have to keep going back is because I've run out of basic power and torpedoes. What's even more annoying is that the game often requires you to do a bunch of tedious math for no good reason. If you want to use phasers, you can pick automatic or manual, but either way you have to type in the exact amount of power to allocate. The only difference is that in automatic mode, it gives you an estimate of how much power you need in total, not individually. That hardly seems automatic to me. Closer enemies require less power than enemies that are further away, so if you wanted to set the phasers to manual control, you're going to have to know a whole algorithm to know how much energy to use on each opponent, and I don't know any of that. If you want to fire torpedoes, you can also have it fire them automatically or manually. If you pick automatic, it auto-picks the targets. Maybe you want to throw 2 torpedoes at the one enemy at the back, but not use one up on the enemy right in front of you. Then you need to go to manual, in which case you have to manually type in what angle to fire at. But here's the really ridiculous part. These tiles are not just visual abstraction. This game has each enemy take up 1 tile, and you have to aim at that tile. That's how the mechanic works. Problem with that is sometimes you can't hit that tile with any angle. If you type in 1 number, it fires too far to the left. If you add just 1 degree, it's too far to the right. You can't do decimal points, so it's impossible to hit them. This isn't just a problem if you type in the angles manually, by the way. Even if you set the torpedoes to fire automatically, the computer will calculate the angle for you and fire automatically at the wrong angle and still miss, because the exact angle you need is not an exact integer, and even the computer can't hit it. The only way you can hit them is to use phasers, which use way too much precious energy, or you have to move to a different tile so you have a better angle. But if you move, all your opponents get an extra free shot on you. Ah! Even navigation is weird like this. When you navigate, you can use a target calculator to plot a course for you by pointing to the tile on the grid where you want to go. Then it calculates the angle and how many squares you need to move. Like with torpedoes, the exact angle might not be possible to achieve, and you can end up in the wrong tile, and sometimes that means not even arriving in the right quadrant, which can be kind of a big deal if you're trying to hurry back to a starbase to get repaired, and you land in a different quadrant with a bunch of Krellin warships ready to blast you as soon as you stop moving. Enemy ships stay stationary at the beginning of the game, but after you go up in rank, they start to move around. This can make things incredibly hard because now they can just move out of the way of torpedoes. Now phasers are a little more necessary because they lock onto your enemy, but again, they use up way too much energy to be worth it, or possible. Also, when they move, there's a chance you can lose your lock-on anyway. And if they move further away, your phasers do less damage, so what would have been enough energy to destroy them now isn't enough, and you'll have to fire again, which means, yep, the enemies get another shot on you. You can lay mines, and enemies can fly into them, but to lay mines you have to move, and that means they get more free shots on you. By the way, you don't get an extra attack if they move. They can move and attack in the same turn, but you can't. The game also sometimes throws cloaked enemies at you called Zaldrons, so now you have to fire at enemies that are invisible, which at least mixes things up a little bit. And I have to say, given the rest of the game, I'm actually a little impressed that in the manual these guys look like some kind of bug monster and are not just a ripoff of Romulans. In the game they have no appearance other than just a letter of the alphabet, so for all I know they were absolutely designed to be the Romulans. The Zaldrons suck! The fact that they're invisible isn't what makes them so annoying. You can fire a cluster of torpedoes in a spread and you have a reasonably good chance of hitting them, and if you look at which part of your shields is being damaged, you have a clue which general direction they're firing from. If you hit them and don't quite kill them, their position is revealed and then you can deal with them like a normal Krellin, right? No. What's absolutely infuriating is that they will just drop into a quadrant with no warning, and then just as suddenly leave. Unlike Krellins, who only act when you move or attack, Zaldrons can just skip out in the middle of one of your actions. I was in a battle with a bunch of ships and tried to lay mines, but ran right into a Zaldron, then tried to attack it and it just bounced. They do this way too often. The Zaldron showed up in the middle of a battle, I tried to fire torpedoes, the Zaldron disappeared. I disabled the last Krellin and locked a tractor beam on it and was ready to leave, and then the Zaldron decided to come back, which caused my shields to go back up, which severed the tractor beam, so I have to do it over again. They're so annoying. All in all, I'd say this is a decent game, if only because they did a spectacular job of making a sophisticated starship simulator for such an old computer. It's just, with the myriad of problems it has, it can often be too tedious and frustrating to really be fun. I would only recommend it for really hardcore retro gamers who are really into Star Trek. Green Beret. Green Beret is a port of the arcade game of the same name, which is also known as Russian Attack. It's a pun, you see. Although this particular version of the game is super hard. To its benefit, I would say that it controls really well. Your attack animation might appear less fluid than the other versions of the game, as it has just one frame of attack, but I think it kind of looks better as a stab than the awkward and cumbersome slash the other versions have. It also means that you can attack really quickly with excellent precision. You need that precision. If you're too far, you miss. Too close, you can stab right through and miss a soldier entirely, which means you're dead. By the way, this game also plays much faster than the original arcade game, which is part of what makes this game extra challenging. Especially because it was programmed in Europe, where the Commodore ran at 50 frames per second, but if you play it on a North American machine like mine, it runs at 60 frames per second and it's noticeably faster. The enemy soldiers can also attack really quickly without warning. The most common generic soldiers have a rifle, and while they don't shoot often, if they do attack, it's a little like trying to dodge a real bullet. And there are these soldiers that jump kick you. They have a pattern that is really hard to predict, and it's really difficult to stab at just the right moment. It may be too hard for a lot of players, but if you like a good challenge, it's a pretty fun game. And these graphics are incredible. Keep in mind, the Commodore 64 has just 16 colors in total, and each individual tile or sprite can only have 4 colors, including transparency, which often means you really just have 3. With that in mind, it's incredible how realistic everything looks. Most games on the Commodore look very cartoony or blocky in comparison, so bravo! Oh, and incidentally, this game was the second game where I sat at the title screen and just listened to the music for a while. It's up there with Commando. Zed. I played this soon after discovering Space Pilot 2, and there are definitely some similarities. It's also a top-down shooter with an endless background where you can move in all directions and shoot enemy spacecraft, but there are a few interesting differences. First, it's not an auto-scroller. You fully control where you're going. The environment wraps around, so if you keep flying in the same direction, you quickly end up where you just left. To beat each level, you don't wait out a timer. You have to find each level's exit portal and jump in. But each portal is guarded by a sort of square force field, and the only way to penetrate it is to get these special bombs that are dropped by very specific enemies. You fire them by hitting the spacebar. It often pays to get multiple bombs and make as big a hole as possible so it's easier to squeeze through, but you have a limited amount of health, and you're being fired on by enemies pretty much all the time, so you don't want to waste too much time hunting down bombs, or you can eventually get pelted to death. You don't die if you hit the force field, but it does do quite a lot of damage. When you go through, your health is refilled to full, so sometimes you can just brute force it by slamming into the shield over and over again until you get through the gap at just the right angle. It's risky but doable, and sometimes it's actually less risky than having to fight your way through hordes of enemies for a long period of time. This game's graphics may not be as polished as Space Pilot 2's, but it has a very smooth look to it, and it has even more of a futuristic feel to everything. I'm not sure I would recommend it to someone today since it's simple and there's not much variety in the levels, but as a kid, I thought it was really cool. Okay, we're halfway done. See you at part 5.